Hello and welcome to this session on enhancing cybersecurity and tackling fraud in the remote working environment. Now, before I introduce you to my fantastic panelists, I'd like to just cover off a little bit of housekeeping so that everyone knows where everything is. So for Q&A, and we'd love to have your questions through the session, there's a toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen with about the session information, of course, Q&A, speaker feedback, notes, etc. So do put those, submit those questions during the session, and we'll try answering them as we go along or at the end, depending on what works best. The session is being recorded, and it will be made available for replay on the event platform by the end of the day. So you can come back anytime in the next 14 days to look at this again or catch up on bits that you might have missed in the other sessions, of course. So do get engaged also on social media. There's our Twitter handle @ACT Update, and the hashtag is ACT Cash Management. Do join our LinkedIn groups as well. But without further ado, I'd like now to move to introduce my panelists. And we're going to, I mean, the topic is I think it's obvious how critical the topic is. So I'm not going to say much by way of introduction. I think I'll leave that to my panelists as we don't have a huge amount of time today. But I'd like to welcome each of them and ask them, you've got their bios in the about the session, so I'm not going to repeat all of that, but I'd like them to introduce themselves briefly, just to remind you who they are, and then to say, you know, why they're passionate about this topic, and also maybe reveal something a little bit personal about themselves which you may not know, just because in this virtual environment it's nice to get a little bit more human. So if I could ask, if we're going to start in reverse alphabetical order, I think I'm going to pick Patrick first.
Thank you, Caroline. And hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Verspecht. I'm the group treasurer of Trillium Flow Technology, which is a UK-US-based multinational. We do design and manufacture highly engineered industrial valve and pumps. And it's basically for the power generation market, nuclear, oil and gas, also for the water and wastewater, quite a broad range of market, but all within the energy. We are located worldwide, so we have a footprint in Asia, Europe, and North America. Why am I passionate about cyber fraud? I don't know if the passionate is the real word, but you cannot see it. But in front of me, in my office, I have a big poster, 3 words: cash is king. And one of my roles is obviously to protect the cash of the company. And beside the tax payment notice and whatsoever, the biggest threat is obviously a cyber fraud. So I've probably for the last 5-6 years, I've been really in depth into the subject. I like it. Something more personal about myself, I would say quickly two. One, in regards of my careers, you don't know because it's not on my LinkedIn profile. Before being a treasurer, I've been 18 years in the IT field of the corporate. I've been everything from a programmer to IT director. Second thing, something that you don't know neither, it's I'm a very good cook. Okay, so that's my passion beside cyber fraud. I like the cooking, and I estimate myself as being a very good chef. Sorry.
Oh well,
Thank you,
the Belgians are renowned. My grandmother was Belgian, and she was a brilliant cook. And I always say the Belgians are the absolute best. So I'm now angling for you know, to taste something sometime, Patrick, when we get to see each other in person again.
Absolutely.
I'm just moving on then to Mike, please, if you would mind introducing yourself.
Hi, thanks, Caroline. Hello, everyone, and you know, really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. Mike Brookes, I head up cyber operations intel for Barclays Bank. I'm also a co-lead for something called the Financial Sector Cyber Coordination Cell, which is a kind of collaboration between the UK sector and some of the authorities as well. Why am I passionate about cybersecurity? Well, ultimately, it's because every time we prevent an attack, every time we share a piece of information that helps somebody else prevent an attack, you know, we win. We have to get it right every time. They only have to get it right once, and every time we succeed, you know, that's really good in my book. Something about myself you don't know. I haven't been able to do it for a few months, but I'd rather be in the mountains. I'm sorely missing being up high and looking down on valleys and things like that. So hopefully in the UK soon, I'll get to do that. So
what's your favourite mountain to look down from then, Mike?
It's a mountain called Helvellyn in the Lake District.
Really?
Wonderful place, Ullswater, prettiest place in England.
Beautiful, isn't it? I used to live up there. I've been across Striding Edge a couple of times myself.
Yes.
And for those who don't know it, it's a very kind of sharp edge, and you walk along it, and the huge drops to either side. But it's absolutely stunning. My favourite place in the world too. Lovely. Well, we've got lots in common already in the team today. So great to hear that. So moving on to Jason, last but not least.
So first, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as I know we're talking to people across the globe. My name is Jason Harrell. I am the head of our external engagements for operation and technology risk at DTCC. I work in global public policy for cyber resilience, new and emerging technologies, as well as financial digitalization. Prior to working in this area, I had about 10 years in operational cyber and another 7 years in IT and building up of computer networks. So I'm fascinated with cyber, I guess because it has all the makings of a great suspense novel. You have shadowy characters with malicious intent. You have high table stakes with undesirable outcomes. You have good guys trying to keep the world from collapsing. And I have the propensity to root for the underdog. So I think that's what drives my fascination about this space. And so, what was the last one? Oh, the factoid. So one thing that I've been able to do during the course of this pandemic, usually I'm on the road a lot, so I don't have an opportunity to do it. But since I've been home for almost a year, I have also, been doing a lot of my own cooking and taking photos and everything. And now I have a little group of individuals where I share photos and recipes with, so that we can, try out different types of food and cuisines and stuff like that. So that's been a lot of fun over the last 11 months of being at home.
Very good. Well, thanks very much for that, Jason. And thanks to all of you for joining us from, as you say, all around the world. We're very international on this panel. So just staying with you, Jason, I'd like to ask you about, has COVID, and specifically the remote work environment, really changed things from a cybersecurity perspective? And are there other factors besides remote working that have also had an impact?
Absolutely. I mean, I think number one, the global pandemic shifted the workforce from corporate-owned offices to individual home networks. And this change actually increases the surface area that's available for attack against the actual corporate network. When devices are on the corporate network, we have all the security controls. We're able to patch machines regularly. We have network monitoring. We have intrusion detection systems. We have physical security controls to protect all of the laptops and workstations that are there. When it shifts to the home network, these same controls don't exist on those home networks. In addition to that, employees have their own devices on those networks. So you have Internet of Things devices, you have streaming TVs that are connected, you have mobile devices, you have smart homes that are used to control the temperature within your homes. All of these are now on the same network as that corporate device, and we don't know the security posture of those devices. So if employees don't know how to protect them, then again, that provides another vector for malicious actors to get access to those devices and then use those devices as a proxy to get onto the corporate network.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I would say that we have, stressed employees, people are working at home, their home and their office life have now merged. They're trying to do homeschooling. They have all the pressures of being cooped up. And when you have overstretched employees, they become more susceptible to phishing. And the global pandemic has been used as a way to phish individuals. We've seen COVID donation sites, COVID information sites, COVID heat maps, and all of these things are being used to try to get employees to click on links. And between the stress of that and people's interest in COVID, you have an increased probability that people will actually click on the link.
Yeah, because the bad guys and girls will take advantage of that kind of situation. So that's a really interesting point you've brought out about people under pressure and how they react. And I also thought it was really interesting when you talked about things you might not even think about, that how you control the temperature in your house, that's attached to a system and other people can get into it that way. Really fascinating. But I'll move on to Mike now to get your perspective.
I think, yeah, just picking up and kind of reinforcing all of those great points, really. I think one of the main things that you get in an office is the ability to spin your chair around and ask another person a question. And if there's a phishing link that's come in and you're not a bit too sure, you can ask the person next to you, and they can you can figure it out together. And that's kind of gone. And we're living in an environment where people are a little bit more cautious, or maybe they're not. And the themes that Jason had brought in, certainly kind of the COVID themes. We're seeing vaccine themes now, much unsurprisingly to do with DHL and all these home delivery service, because that's what everybody's doing, and you can't check it with somebody else. So yeah, that's kind of the way that it's changed. A lot of the threat per se itself hasn't changed. The way it manifests, how much it's spread out. So one of the key topics that I'm quite interested in is cybersecurity resilience, and not only from a technology or a security perspective, but a personal perspective as well. So just to kind of re-articulate what Jason said, all of that resilience is now at the end of the VPN. It's the bunch of devices that you don't control, and actually that's now the kind of environment that you need to operate in. You need to be cognizant of, and you need to put those controls in place to try and counter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Moving to Patrick, as a treasurer, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, in fact, in regards of our treasury team, we were well prepared, I think, to work from home, because in 2019, we set up a contingency plan involving remote working from home. Today, every member of the team has a company printer, a company cell phone, dual screen, so to get some kind of comfortable seating, and obviously company notebooks. Yes, they are on the home network to some extent, obviously, but we are all using a very highly secure VPN connection tool to connect to the Trillium network. So I believe, if I'm trusting my IT guys, and as an ex-IT guy, I'm not sure, but okay, we should be safe. Okay, our team is split between 3 locations: France, UK, and Italy. And I think that, as Jason and to some extent Mike did mention, one of the biggest impact of the COVID was on the mental area. We are not able to meet. We used to have 2 or 3 times a week of meeting all together in one of the locations, and for the last year or so, it's not there anymore. So we have every day, I have a meeting team in the morning, and I have also we call it a coffee break. It's a virtual coffee break, but it's a real one. Everyone has his coffee or his snacks at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, 2 p.m. UK time, but it's something which help. And I mean, at least minimum twice a week, twice a day, we are all together again. We are using Teams in the office, in the company, so it's easy for us to chat any questions. We do it, either we call through Teams or we chat as a group. So we are trying to cope with that a physical separation. My only concern, or let's say, it's not one of my concern was to make sure it was only for a small period of time. In regards of COVID, last year in March, we were not sure at that time if we would not have any kind of liquidity shortage on the market, on the money market. If you remember, in 2009, that's what happened. For months and months, we were not able, I mean, the access to liquidity was not there because of the economic crisis, because of the financial crisis, and because of the fact that the banks would not trust anymore each other, if I want to get it simplified. Hopefully it was not the case, but we were afraid for a few weeks on that. Otherwise, yes, we found that some of our banks didn't get well prepared to work from home or to work at reduced team. As an example, in our market, we are a big consumer of bank guarantees, of LCs. And some of our customers, like for example, in some of the Asian countries, still require to have their original paper, even in 2020, even today. So some of the banks would just not be able to do that. They would only be able to provide PDF documents. And I thought that was a surprise to me, because basically, I was able to provide the original coming from my side, but not the banks from their side. It's a little bit better, but for quite a few months, that did really cause some business issues. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I could go with example, but I think that you get the idea. Our company is doing well despite the COVID. The mental of our people are the only concern for me. And then otherwise, I think that our banks could have been much more prepared, I think, to live with the COVID.
Indeed. Thanks, Patrick. And you mentioned when we were preparing, you talked about some testing that you've been doing internally. And are you willing to share that little anecdote with the audience today?
Yes, of course, indeed. I mean, I hope that we were not the only corporate, but we have launched last year, the beginning of the year, our policies. I mean, we made some changes of policies in regards of using IT tools, including emails. So what we decided to do, not only for finance, but also for everyone, including our shop floor people, we launched a kind of quite a number of set of training across the group. We are testing grosso modo every 5-6 weeks. Could be some exercise attempting what we call the president fraud, or faked emails, and actually a small, very amusing stuff. We received a link a few weeks ago to access training on cyber fraud by email coming from our IT director. Most of our people did click on the link just to get the message, sorry, you should not have done that. This was a fake email. Obviously, it was coming from our own IT team, so nothing damage. Okay, but basically, the name of the IT director, there was one letter missing, and one of the L in the Trillium was in fact a I, so no one did notice it. Well, 80% of the people didn't notice it, but that was a little bit tricky.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. It's a bit like the examples that we heard earlier from Jason about, people taking advantage of the situation. So if you ask people, invite them to a training on cyber fraud, then they think, oh yeah.
Exactly.
So really great anecdote there. Now, you put a little bit of a challenge on the technology side because you commented on how some of the banks are a little bit, living in maybe in the past and not getting as digital as they should be. So I'd like to turn to Jason now and just hear a little bit about what has been going on in the tech world, what changes have been happening there, what can we expect? If you wouldn't mind, Jason.
Yeah, well, I would say that the global pandemic has reinforced the importance of operational resilience. I think most financial institutions have actually shown resolve through the pandemic, but we actually recognize that more is needed. After the financial crisis in the mid-aughts, we had a big push for financial resilience, and now that is being expanded to address all hazards, including cyber attacks. So supervisory authorities and financial institutions have actually been working together to develop principles to lay the foundation of what operational resilience should look like. So you have the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. They put together some principles on operational resilience. You have the UK financial authorities who put out several papers on enhancing the UK's financial resilience and operational resilience that can be found. And then you have within the European Union, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is currently sitting with the European Parliament, that is looking to have a consistent application of resilience across the member states. And then in the US, you have the Federal Reserve Board, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC, and they put out a paper at the end of last year for strengthening the operational resilience of the largest financial firms. So I think we're going to see a big push in this space where supervisors and institutions are working together to look at third-party risk management, because it's not just the resilience of the financial institutions. A lot of services have been pushed out to third-party providers. So what are we doing to make sure that those third-party providers are actually resilient as well? We're looking at IT providers, so cloud services, AI services that financial firms may be using to actually improve their own operational resilience, but how are we actually measuring how resilient those providers are as well? You're going to look at resilience testing. So, more than just the BCP, business continuity or disaster recovery practices, but if your third party can't provide a service, for example, what is your exit strategy for that vendor? And have you tested that? And can you do end-to-end testing to make sure that the plans that you put in place for resilience are actually going to work? And then last but not least, you'll have the supervisors and the institutions looking at incident reporting. So when an incident occurs and we provide that information to the supervisors, is there a consistent way we can do that so that the supervisors can then also in turn inform the financial institutions of what they're seeing around the threat landscape for cyber attacks, so that we can improve and enhance our controls as financial institutions and thus raise the floor for our preparedness for these events. So I think these are all the things that are currently ongoing, and you'll see a continuation of that.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Jason. So a lot of change, no doubt, to be expected. But there's a question that's kind of relating to something you talked about earlier, and also relating to resilience. And I wonder if you would mind having a go at answering this one. How do employees protect corporate devices against networking hacking at home? And what can corporates do to enhance the security? So it goes back to your point a little while back, but how do we get more resilient with all those devices and things going on at home as a corporate?
So I would first say for your Wi-Fi networks, make sure you're choosing strong passwords and that you change them on occasion. That will help, keep people from being able to actually get onto your corporate network. A very simple thing you can do is if you're not using your corporate device, then turn it off. Don't have it on and connected to the network to begin with. So that's a way to enhance the security of that. And from a corporate perspective, when those devices connect to the network, doing some checks on those devices before they're allowed to connect, so that you can have some level of assurance around the baseline security of the device that's connecting to your network. And that's some things that corporates can do as well to enhance the security.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks very much, Jason. And maybe Mike, moving to you, what are you seeing coming and the changes that are necessary and will be happening?
Well, I think, the articulation there was actually the complexity of all of this. I wouldn't say that there's any new or per se emergent tech. It's just the speed at which we've had to adopt it and the speed at which we've had to adapt to that adaptation as well. And then, coupled on top of that, all the regulators are coming and piling extra policies on top of us, and somehow we've got to manage all of this stuff. And I kind of looked like a rabbit in the headlights there because that's sometimes how you feel. And I think just to integrate it as well into that, what can corporates do? How can you increase your resilience? And I'm going to be entirely parochial from my job, which is, be what we call adversary centric. So actually, do you know what your threats are? Do you know who they are? Do you know what kind of groups they are? What countries they operate in? Do you know what they're after? And then rank them and prioritize them. And then once you've done that, you can use that as a lens to view all of your policies, all of your procedures, because you simply can't do all of this all at once. You have to do it in a prioritized fashion. That has to be based upon how does that threat manifest as risk within your own personal environment. And I think once you start to go on that journey and understand those initial questions, then you can start to just slowly chip away at your resilience. Every time the regulators come and ask you a question, they're going to grow more confident with what your corporate security is like and how you're managing this kind of dynamic changing world and the technology around that as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. And you're absolutely right. This complexity and the need to prioritize is really critical, as ever, and that's the challenge, isn't it? But just staying with you, Michael, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about, we talked as we were talking about insider threat and also the human factor. Any insights you could give us around that would be helpful for our treasurers?
Yeah, I think that we've talked about tech, we've talked about change, talked about cyber, and we can't forget that we're people, and tech is very important, but the people in your team and your colleagues are the most important. They're the first and the last line of defense in all of this. And one of the concerns that I have, this is personal rather than kind of the organization I represent, is actually, and we've touched on this a couple of times, is how is this manifesting within the stresses and strains that people are having within their life? Are they unwitting insiders? Are they doing things that perhaps, say, as simple as forwarding an email to your home address to print it out? If people are doing things that actually, we've talked about, if your home environment is at risk and then you're forwarding things, are people unwittingly, because they're stressed, becoming an insider? And these are the sorts of questions that we need to kind of step back and ask ourselves and think, if you had an insider threat program before this, how's that environment changed in the past 12 months? And how might that be affected going forwards? So, all of this is individual to each and every company, but again, you've got to kind of step back and say, well, could it be easier for insiders to facilitate and work with cybercrime? Would they just be unwitting and expose themselves to something bad there? So, quite all important stuff that we need to consider if we're not already.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, anything to add on that one?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. I don't have anything to add to that.
And we're coming very shortly to the end of this session. So Patrick, any brief words on that? Or otherwise, I'll move on to our final question for the panelists.
No, really, as Jason rightly mentioned, Mike said it all. Yeah.
Well, okay, so my final question, I'll start off with you, Patrick, is where will 2021 take us, do you think, from a cyber threat perspective?
Difficult questions. I'm not a cyber threat expert as Jason and Mike are, obviously. I'm thinking about education, the policies that we need to maybe to review and to slightly adjust to be able that we are securing our assets. And I think that the cost, the budget impacts will be probably higher than we may expect. I mean, we need to invest in more security tools, or maybe to review our security tools. A lot of education needs to be done, and also something that people don't think too much. Do we all have the right cyber coverage in our insurances? And that's a question, that I did ask myself last year, and oops, no, because no one thought about that. So obviously we have one now, okay, but we are due for a new one in a few months, and I can tell you that my broker already told me expect a huge double-digit increase in that particular risk, okay, which means that insurers obviously are probably having a loss, are in a loss situation in that particular area. And then I think that in 2021, one of the risks will come also from the new functionalities in cash management. Example, at least in the SEPA area, and so in the Euro area, we have instant payment. Okay, I've sent an email to all my entities saying, don't use instant payment today, because I'm not sure, if it is an instant payment, like in Belgium, within 10 seconds, your cash is gone. Okay, hopefully it's going to the right account, but it may not. So I think that, the new functionalities is probably a new area of threat in that scope.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Jason, very briefly, your thoughts for 2021?
I think we're going to see an evolution in office working as people start to come back to the office. Hopefully by the end of this year, you're going to have still a considerable amount of individuals who are working at home and individuals who are in the office, and how do we actually balance that? I think we're going to see, as far as processes and procedures are concerned, things that we were doing just for short term to fix a problem are now going to have to be long-term solutions. So how do you institute that in a meaningful and thoughtful way, and make sure that they're documented, make sure that you understand the risk of the new working environment that has been developed. And then I think, to Mike's point, we're going to look at, the opportunities for resilience. We have new and emerging technologies, you have AI, you have distributed ledger, you have cloud, becoming a real factor. And how can we better utilize those tools in order to, automate certain activities and remove the human element from having to participate, so that we can be resilient, especially in times like this. So I see all of those things happening in 2021.
And finally, thank you very much, Jason. Mike, your thoughts 2021?
Ransomware isn't going away. It's definitely not going away. And you or your supply chains are at high risk. And if parts of your business process are removed in an instant, what do your run books like to deal with that? And then secondly, geopolitics is shifting, and it's going to shift fast this year, I think. And if you look at the SolarWinds attack over Christmas, that really brings into sharp focus of how professional, how sophisticated espionage is, cyber espionage. So, if these kinds of things are going against our regulators, our authorities, our governments, how does that change the dynamics and how we're supposed to deal with them with cybersecurity?
That's a great point, and we have to remember they are always one step ahead, and this is serious organised crime. It's not just some geek messing around a bit trying to hack into your system. It's quite different, as we know. I'm sorry we've not been able to get to all questions, but you can continue the discussion and maybe put your questions into the discussion group, and hopefully you'll get some answers through that. But this is quite a short session, so apologies for that. Do watch the session again on demand, all the other ones that we're running concurrently. And I'd just like to thank my speakers very much for being with me today. And it was very insightful. And thank you once again.